Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Resource Roadshow, and it's Friday, so it's time for Protecting the Nest. Good morning, Carol.
Sorry about that. I forgot I was muting because the leaf blowers are out and it's raining here. How do you have beautiful weather where you are?
Yes, it is raining, but it was raining yesterday, and I went out to check to see if if there was some kind of oily feel to it. Because we've heard reports that along the East Coast, a lot of people have had that problem. Some say it's acid rain. Some say there's some other chemical in it. It might be some of the ash that's coming down from the Canadian fires. But as far as I could tell, here in Atlanta, Georgia, there was no oily feeling to it.
Did you get foam on the street? That was the other thing that was reported too. That the rain was foaming up, kind of like hydrogen peroxide on the streets. That was interesting.
I saw those pictures, but no, here on our streets there was none of that. Just the usual oil and residue from industrial products. I'm not saying that the fumes that come out of our factories here in Atlanta don't contain something noxious, but nothing like that was in those videos that we saw.
Well, I know from the last few years that we had those horrible fires in the Northwest and the whole West Coast was on fire, that even just plain old ash, and whether that was plain old ash or not, we're not sure, but it's just horrible to have, to be breathing this thick, dark air that makes the sun red. It really feels apocalyptic when that was happening here. So I am really sorry to hear that it's all over the whole East Coast this year, early on in the season too. It's not really fire season, so there's many curious elements about this.
Good morning, Amber.
Good morning. How's everybody?
You're doing great.
Yeah, we're all
Did you hear
good.
me talking about the rain in Atlanta?
Acid rain?
I just telling Carol that I didn't see any evidence of acid rain. Have you?
No. In fact, there's a bunch of TikTok and other videos that show people in the eastern or in the northeast after it rains. So they see all the smoke. After it rains, there's like some weird residual that's on the ground. At first, it looks like little pebbles or like stuff that's bundled together. And then when they get up close, it's bubbling like hydrogen peroxide. And so there's lots of videos on it, lots of people talking about it. So yeah, it's weird because you get rain and then if it's just smoke, right? I don't know. Is that how ash looks? It looks like bubbled up hydrogen peroxide.
No, it's not what ash looks. I mean, we've had all these horrible forest fires for years now in the West, later on August, September, and it doesn't bubble up. That's not what we see. So it's a different kind of material, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
why.
but I don't know if anybody that's supposed to be looking into it actually cares, because there's a lot of people talking about it, but nobody seems to be interested. So who knows why or what? But you can only mention it, and then if it's good enough to talk about, it's good enough to talk about. If it's not, well, then it's not. But people are complaining about it, and the more it's not addressed, or authorities don't come out and try to explain or make sense of it, the more there's a conspiracy that pops up. So I know people will get frustrated at conspiracy people, and then they'll make fun of them or say they're so stupid. But I mean, what are people supposed to do? 1 minute you're told, hey, we're being lied to. We need to know the truth. You need to pay attention and ask for accountability. And then if you ask for accountability, you have to be a mind reader to know when it's important to ask for accountability and when it's something stupid. So there's just a lot of people who are really, really smart who don't have patience for people who are trying, to kind of be helpful or trying to look into something, because it just becomes annoying to them. But I mean, how else do you get people to move the needle and expect communication on it and, for somebody to take responsibility for the chaos? So it's, I see people all the time, there's some really brilliant people out there, and especially people like in the government that say, hey, you got to push back, you got to do something. And then when people do, they're annoyed. They're like, I can't believe they believe this stuff. Yeah, but nobody's addressed what it is. So it's the same thing that happened with the railroad thing up in Ohio. And at first everybody was like, you don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. And this is so stupid. You're wasting time. It's just theater, except real people were getting sick. And right now real people are sick. And, they show their water, has issues. But yet, if you say anything about it, you're feeding into the conspiracy. If you don't say anything about it, you're letting them all get away with murder. So there's never really anybody who can say anything except for the people who are setting the tone, or the people who are the ones that decide what is or is not to be talked about. So, that's what's so discouraging to the smaller people who are trying to help, because they really don't know when to do what or how. And even if they're following the lead, or the lead can change within a moment's notice. So it's very, very difficult to try to move people to make a change. And so I've seen people get frustrated. I don't get frustrated because I've paired up with people who make sense, but there's a lot of people out there that are telling people they got to do something. But then when they, show them something, if it's not of their interest, they kind of cut them down or ignore them. And thank goodness, the people I've decided to hang out with are not doing that. Right. But there's a lot of people out there, and I watch it all the time, where they're yelling at people. Well, we are where we are because you let it happen. And then they try to do something. And then they're like, no, you don't understand. And then you're like, well, help. They're like, help me understand. And then they're like, well, no, it's difficult to explain. So then they're poo-pooing it everywhere when people try to understand by telling them they don't understand, but they can't even explain it themselves. So do they understand? So that's really the bigger issue that I'm seeing fall on the American public, because there's this high expectation where they're supposed to be doing stuff and looking into things, but there's no reward system. There's just a highly critical system that comes back at you. And so to me, it seems like the declared narrative has already been declared, and you're supposed to go along with it and promote it, but you don't even know who to promote or what to declare, because you can get in trouble every 5 minutes because you're just too stupid to understand. So I think that's a bigger frustration for people, and why they tune out. And then why we get to where we are, because it's an impossibility for people to help, because they don't even know where to help. Because as soon as they start helping, there's just as many people telling them that where they're helping is stupid. So, I'm glad our research group doesn't do that, but we have to be aware that so many do. And so many people shut each other down, and they want to be the first to the punch. And then if somebody else does something, they shut them down. I see it every day. And it's happening, in local governments and everything else. And it's just, people's ego get in the way, and it discourages people from participating. And again, I can help people, tell them who to follow. And, Carol knows, and so many other people know, and they're aware of it. And I think that that's something that we need to help people with, because they're really struggling, because they want to do something and they want to help, but they're just not paired up with the right people to do so. And, I feel their pain.
Well, I think what you're saying is exactly right. And one of my links, which maybe we'll get to a little later, that's really the main part of the discussion. So here again, we have some serendipity too, because this is a guy, he sounds British, and he wears this weird makeup that makes him look very eerie. But the point he's making is that, all the mainstream media that has this lockstep message to everybody, and says anyone that questions it, is a conspiracy theorist, and calls names, that it's happening. And more people are going to this one-to-one information, peer-to-peer information, instead of all getting their news at once. So that is a paradigm shift that's happening. It's not big enough, as we see. But he had some really great example of some of the stuff that Whitney Webb had come out with too. So, but that shift is that we have to take responsibility to find the truth. And what we saw with COVID is that when things didn't make sense, people who had access to labs were just getting their own samples taken of what's in the shots, and let's look at this and let's see what's really there. So that taking personal responsibility to figure out what the truth is, what that paradigm shift is. And that kind of fits in with what your Ho'oponopono prayer was a couple of weeks ago. There's still more to talk about that. I think that we all have to do that with our health. And that was another link I put in, was to the vitamin D studies. There was a really great discussion about, taking responsibility for your own immune system is really pretty simple. And there's a couple basic things that everybody, if you know that, anything that hits you, whether it's smoke, whether it's detox, whatever it is, it's going to help to do some of these simple things that people are listing now. And one of the most simple for viruses is vitamin D. So it's interesting. I think this acid rain, of course, or whatever it is, whatever's in that smoke coming down, and however those fires got started.
Well, let's go back to Amber's point about the frustration that people are feeling. First, I'm gonna play the first clip of the young man with the British accent talking about the one-to-one communication and how it can be manipulated. And then I'll go back to Northeast Ohio and show why people are so frustrated. Okay, so here we go to media player, share sound. Okay.
Fake corrupted press are in a time of emergency, let's say. They're crying, they are sad. The reason as to why is because this new medium, technology, this new wave of media, which is characterized by one connection with the audience, with the individuals, characterized through open dialogue, debate, and discussion. It's not technologically restricted. It doesn't get funding from corrupted people and billionaires such as Bill Gates. It doesn't have a skewed motive, at least in the case of this channel. This is the new era of media, which we can now find the truth through open dialogue, debate, and discussion. Nobody's going to stop us. This is a new wave of media. You're part of the journey. Get on board. This is the search for truth. And the corrupted fake news, they're very, very sad. The media is not here to tell you the truth. The media is not here anymore to find the real events which are occurring throughout the society. The media is not here anymore to be impartial, to be able to change their mind. Imagine if CNN just came on one day and said, sorry, we changed our mind. We're so wrong. It wouldn't happen. This is what I'm saying. Media, conventional legacy media is restricted. It's dead. It's going. It's dying. But we want, just as the 15th century church, which they clung on to tyrannical like power after their power was taken away. In light of societal developments, there are major analogies, there are major comparisons in which we can make for the current date, namely the fact that technology is changing. It's changing the dynamics of how we receive and gain information. Mediums such as this, podcasts or discussions, they're going to disrupt the very fabric of these conventional media companies. But, as I stated, just as the 15th century church, which they clung on to tyrannical power, the same is going to occur with the mainstream media today. This is not going to be an easy fight, but we need to speak the truth. We need to have this open dialogue, debate, and discussion. Whatever happened to the media that used to hold people to account, whatever happened to the media which used to ask hard questions, whatever happened to the media who used to portray hard truths, whatever happened to the media, the investigation journalists, those who really were responsible for exposing the corruption within elite circles, whatever happened to this? It just feels like, and I believe many people sympathize with this view.
Okay, I'll stop it there for a second.
Okay.
I like the part where he talks about hard truths. And one of the hard truths that that people in Ohio are going to have to accept, and here I'll open the parenthesis or explain the background. One of the hard truths is that all the media, all of them, even alternative media with a weekly viewership of 250,000 or more, are all essentially working for the big club. In East Palestine, the people are very, very frustrated because, as Amber was describing before, the issues in East Palestine, which continue to get worse, have been brushed off the national map. I mean, the national is no longer in the national news on any of the mainstream and 99% of the alternative channels. So the people there are left to argue amongst themselves as to who's supposed to do what and how come no one's actually doing anything positive. And they've been divided into 4 separate groups, and they're getting further and further apart and nothing is getting done. And that's the great frustration. But the key to the division between these four groups is the CNN, Fox News, WJW or WVW, Newsmax, you name it. All the channels with a weekly viewership of 250,000 or more are in on the deal. They're all working in some way to divide the people.
Yeah, and I think it's part of this no trust thing that is, you break down any trust everywhere you look. So each group doesn't trust each other. Nobody trusts, or some of them do trust the media. The other ones don't. The government is obviously not trustworthy at this point. Elections are not trustworthy. The police aren't trustworthy. It's we're watching the program that we saw people talk about. We saw the plans for this program, and now we're just watching it execute. But the point he made was that having these discussions one-on-one and having this, media through the cell phone and the laptop is breaking that up. It is getting back to trying to, everyone has a point of view about what the truth is, and we all examine it from many, many different angles and have that conversation. And you don't just say, this is the truth, before you have any idea of whether it is or not. That's just not how you get to actionable plan that makes sense to go where you want to go. It doesn't do it.
Exactly. And I keep encouraging people, especially young people, my nephews and their friends, to go to the library and do the hard research that requires you to accept your own biases, your own brainwashing, so to speak. And that's why, and many of them resist, say, well, no, because I watch Newsmax, I know what's going on. I watch some other channel or some podcaster. And I say, no, you've got to go to the library and look at texts that were published prior to 1977, more or less, and do the get the actual data from those published sources, not from the internet, not from Wikipedia, etc.
Well, John, I think that's a great example of, kids are getting brainwashed and they don't know how to do that anymore. And they don't think it's important or necessary. And that's what the brainwashing is. The experts can tell you the answer and you're not qualified to figure it out. And if you try, you're a conspiracy theorist. If you try to figure out what isn't making any sense at all, and that common sense doesn't matter anymore because there's so much confusion, that it's not necessarily, it's interesting. I was watching Tommy's podcast with Hatfield and Malone. I didn't hear the whole thing yet, but they're painting the picture that really everybody's inept. That everyone they work for is inept and making horrible mistakes, and they know it, they can see it, but it's just not in the organization to be able to right the ship. It's not there anymore. It's been removed. That's not their conclusion, but that's kind of what I'm hearing through in between the lines. And I think that's part of the no trust thing too. If people don't have good information, they can't make good policies. And so we're all at the mercy of these policies being made basically by AI, I think, at this point. And the other clip I had that was from that same one, the Whitney Webb one, kind of addresses who may be programming our AI. It's just a little piece of an interview that she did talking about Jeffrey Epstein, what went on in the Virgin Islands, that he had gotten all these children that were low income, they were on the spectrum, they were savants, they were targeted and trained to actually learn how to do the AI and the algorithms for this company he was involved in. He was training children to be able to learn how to be the AI programmer. So I've often wondered who's programming these things. Who is it that's programming it? And having that little glimpse that it's people trained from a young age to be servitors, who can't question. And so that's an interesting clip. It's the one from 20 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, I'll play that. And it's interesting that you brought up the word servitor, because just this morning I got an email from a new subscriber, asking what's a servitor, and I had to describe to her what a servitor was. A servitor, for those few who don't know yet, is a not necessarily a public official, but someone with a lot of power, at least at the regional level, who is not really a servant. He or she is often a director level or C level, who responds to the CEO of the company or to the shareholders, but he or she also has someone behind the curtain, right? Someone who's pulling strings behind the curtain, especially for companies in the Boston area. And we'll talk about one potential man behind the curtain on Monday afternoon. But going back to
another thing about servitors too, John, is that a lot of them are compromised. So they're doing things that are actually against their better judgment and not question it, because they're not held accountable to themselves and their heart and their ethics. They're held accountable to the people above them. And so they're acting in those interests rather than, just do no harm kind of interests.
Right.
Yeah. And they can be at any level. I don't think they're all directors. I think any level can have thugs.
Okay, why is this not playing? Oh, okay.
I'm not hearing it.
Then after he gets out, he turns his attention to
Talking
the
about Epstein.
Virgin Islands and starts a new company, which I don't think many Americans have any idea about this part of the story. And we're just now starting to learn more and more about this. Can you take us through sort of the high level first, and then we'll dive into the nitty gritty, disgusting details?
Sure. So the company you're talking about here is called Southern Trust, and he had a few other companies tied up with it, including a bank. That were based on the Virgin Islands after he was arrested for sex trafficking in Palm Beach. And so after that happened, he seemed, like you said, to have directed his attention more to the Virgin Islands. And so this company in particular, Southern Trust, was created in 2012. And it describes itself as offering cutting edge consulting services and as a DNA data mining firm that was trying to find clients specifically among big banks and big pharma. It described itself as sort of a biomedical Google that was trying to use people's genetic sequencing to determine what drugs would work best on them, and all sorts of odd things. And even people in the testimony that he gave to this Economic Development Commission in the Virgin Islands were, very awestruck, I guess you could say, by how, unusual the company was framed as being and what its objectives essentially were. And what's particularly important is that in a lawsuit that was filed by Denise George, who is the same Attorney General of the Virgin Islands that was fired after filing the Epstein JP Morgan case, she had another case targeting Epstein a few years prior. That lawsuit, and also a lawsuit filed by the New York Times, referred to Southern Trust as being a key part of Jeffrey Epstein's criminal activities. But as I said earlier, it was founded in 2012. So this is well after he was busted for sex trafficking the first time, and it was not a part of what he was charged with in 2019. So it seems like the Virgin Islands was really the only entity interested in going after him for this particular company, which, as we've mentioned, was based there. So what's interesting is if you look at the testimony, it doesn't explicitly talk about children, but in his testimony to this commission, he says what he wants to do is essentially engage children early on to train them in programming and to run these artificial intelligence servers that are going to power these algorithms. And so the way he apparently did that was by funding a slew of initiatives targeting youth in the Virgin Islands, specifically mentally ill youth and underprivileged and poor children. And a lot of the those activities are eerily similar to the same ways that he recruited minors, underage girls in the United States, targeting underprivileged, economically underprivileged teenage girls and gifted children in music and the arts. And there's been no interest really in looking into this story among mainstream media, because why would someone, a known pedophile, be engaged in this type of activity? And we know now from the recent Wall Street Journal revelations that prominent banks like the Edmund de Rothschild Group was giving Southern Trust millions and millions of dollars in contracts. And it's just a very disturbing and overlooked story, and might shed some light on why the U.S. Virgin Islands, unlike a lot of jurisdictions in the U.S., are interested in going after a lot of the powerful people that enabled Epstein, particularly billionaires and some of these big banks.
It's crazy. It's truly disturbing. I mean, absolutely disturbing. It sounds like something out of like a Bond villain. Like if you were to write this as part of a movie, people would say, no, this is ridiculous. You're going to have a billionaire who's going to go to the Virgin Islands. He's going to seek out children in order to do biomedical research, implanting things in their brains. Yeah. And even in his testimony, I've gone through these documents that you've sent over, he talks about autistic children specifically. I think like a quarter of them were autistic as well. And did
looking
any of the
for
parents
kids on the spectrum?
Yeah. So looking specifically for kids on the spectrum, did you get any insights into why he was doing that?
Did you buy this painting for $5,000?
Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Stop share. The one thing that she brought up is very important, and that is the part about having experimentation being done in very, very sophisticated laboratories on orphans or very sick kids or victims of child medical kidnap. Very sick experimentation. And I heard about this. I was still in Italy in December of 2009. And that's when I quit both my day jobs and decided to accept the invitation of this group of retired generals to go to Cambridge and do some deep digging, because they retained that the headquarters for all worldwide human experimentation was in Cambridge. Okay, let's play the rest of that clip. Sorry for the commercials. I didn't have time to edit those out yet.
No sound.
Maybe what he was looking for were, I think people are probably familiar with the sort of savant characteristics of some autistic people, and he may have been looking for children and teens that sort of had those unusual abilities, but it's definitely very disturbing. And something he talks about in his testimony to this Virgin Island Commission is the idea of how he aggressively wants to genetically sequence the islander population because it's such an isolated community, and then talks about how those that genetic information can be used to determine how to educate these children that he wants to recruit to ostensibly work for his company in coding and programming. But again, as I mentioned earlier, he's targeting specifically underprivileged children, which is very disturbing in light of the similarities between that and what he was doing as part of his sex trafficking operation with Ghislaine Maxwell.
The major point in which I want to note here is that we live within a post-truth world. And what we've seen with the Epstein scandal, with the Iraq war, with a range of other scandals, namely COVID, climate change, so on and so forth, is just huge level of distrust within mainstream media, and for good reason. The interesting thing is people such as Tucker Carlson, who predicted this, they were speaking out in regards to Epstein, and they noted the scandalous nature of his activities and the mysterious supposed murder in which many people dispute majorly for good reason. But Tucker was labeled as a radical. Many other people who spoke out were labeled as a radical. We cannot do this, people. We must participate in responsible conspiracy theorizing. We must be open towards differing opinions. And we must have the ability to change our minds. We must understand that perhaps we are wrong with our current views. And this is how society moves forward. Free speech, discussion, debate, criticism, conjectures, understanding one another, and not just instantaneously labeling one as a conspiracy theorist, as occurred within the case of this Jeffrey Epstein story. Sometimes the truth is just crazier than fiction, I guess you could say. Sometimes the truth is so crazy that many people don't instantaneously believe it. But if we're open, if we have the capabilities to discuss, debate, then we can expose the fraudulent, corrupt nature of many things within our society. And this is why, for example, the EU's disinformation code, which is coming up and seemingly into force within 2024, upon all social media platforms, is raising concerns. Who knows what the truth is? What is the truth? Do we know? Isn't free speech, speculation, theorization, debate, and discussion, isn't this fundamental towards coming to the truth? The idea of having a ministry of truth, whom can decide what is and what is truth, is dangerous. I believe this notion of the disinformation board fundamentally shall lead towards the protection of the leads and the inability to expose and hold those in power to account. If we can't theorize or have unpopular or controversial views about the world, then we are going to enforce an echo chamber upon oneself. And this is really the danger, as I've said many times.
Okay, there's some weird
he makes
things
up a
about
very
that. Yeah, can you just show a still of his face? Because there's a ton of like the kind of makeup that you would see in horror movies from, you know, the 1940s or something. It's really weird. His, you know, the setting and the lighting, and you kind of accept it like he's a normal person. He's saying things that do make sense, but he's reading from a script. You can see that.
Right.
And, you know, there's just some questions about his analysis as I mean, I love a lot of what he says, but why is he doing it like that? I'm wondering.
I'll bring up a clip of his face in just a second, but I do want to underline what Carol said about there's even a possibility that he himself is in some way and to some degree tainted by the big money, right?
Yeah. But what she said really did raise all kinds of issues. I mean, here's this company that's DNA targeting company, the Southern Trust. That's what they say they're all about. And yet they're training all these kids to actually program. You know, there's just so many questions about just that short clip. Everything she had in there was like, what? How can we make sense of this? You know, and yet there it is in testimony, but from, you know, what Jeffrey Epstein and the company said about themselves and what they were doing. So you just got to scratch your head and say, is this happening here too? You know, why are all these kids coming in the border? Are they being used for sex trafficking? Are they being used for programming AI? Imagine that. I mean, that explains a lot of why the AI is just wackadoodle.
Yeah, and I was unable to find it, but that's exactly the type of. I was looking before the show for a clip from a Air Force airman. She's about 20 years old, 21, and she was really out there. And I'm wondering if she is one of those kids put into the Air Force for this specific purpose. It just really, really made me scratch my head. What's going on here?
Yeah, and the other thing is, you know, the research that we have done into some of the testing that was done on kids, particularly, you know, Mark was looking into that, the testing that was done with kids in the Northeast, kind of up by where he was. They were doing all this radiation testing on, what was called retarded kids at the time. And there was torture involved, the way the kids who were then grown and the testimony they were giving, it was horrific. So you just have to wonder, is there torture? Is there ritual abuse? What is this training they're going through? And what kind of person comes out of the end of that training? And there's all these ads now for preschool, cheap preschool available. And Alison McDowell has gone to a bunch of IEEE, you know what that is, John,
Yeah.
Conventions or whatever they are, get-togethers, and they're talking about this preschool training with iPads and stuff like that. So there's a lot of thought training being going on from early ages that is worth questioning. I mean, that's just one aspect of what she's talking about.
I really liked Alison McDowell's 2 videos covering MITRE and what was the other one? Sandia Laboratories. They were very, very good. I'll put those in the description box after the show. But yeah, it wasn't exactly the thought of kids being involved in these experiments per se that made me quit my day jobs. It was the torture that for up to half an hour each day, they were literally tortured. That was too much for me. And as an American, I said, okay, as an American, I've been trying to defend in front of all my Italian colleagues the idea of truth, justice, and the American way, and Superman and apple pie. Now I'm confronted with the hard to accept fact that there is experimentation being done, torture in the United States.
Well, it's all over the world. I mean, I did the presentation on the global brain with that big paper that was done in 2000 from Australia, talking about a woman who had been tortured from an early age, and they were doing it for disassociation and they had disassociated her into over 800 different parts, and that was all documented. And that disassociation is, I think, how we get psychopaths, so basically they're training psychopaths in a criminal environment from a young age. And and that was a paper that I was given by Alana Freeman, who'd mentioned it in her book, and I wanted to know more about it, but it was on ResearchGate. It's a documented, peer-reviewed research paper of this woman who was tortured for 36 years. And then they did a bunch more experiments on her in Australia. She's from Canberra, or she was originally from England, but her parents moved her family. I don't know if she was the only child. I don't know too much about her, but her name was Diva Paul. Oh, I can't hear you, John. Everybody's on mute except me.
Diva Paul. Yeah, how do you spell the first name? D-I-V-A?
D-E-V-A. P-A-U-L. And I put the link was in my presentation on the deck, but I can get that to you.
Funny, all the Diva Pauls that are available, according to Google, are male. None of them are female.
Well, Google has hidden her. So when I got the actual title and did a search, I found it. So I don't know, it'll take me a minute. So I'll try to get it when someone else is talking, because I can't double track so well. So
it's actually disgusting what's happening. We've reached this epic moment where you have people who are constantly guiding people as to who's bad, who's good. And like, okay, this is a good example. So there will be somebody who let's just take they're in a large group, whether it's a Facebook Live and everyone's commenting, or Twitter Space, or you're somewhere, and you can tell when you're being led and kind of bullied into a train of thought. And how that happens, and it's really ugly how it happens, is there will be somebody who gets frustrated and then they say, a naughty word. And then someone will come up and go, we can't say that stuff. That's not good. It's going to get us kicked off. We need decorum. We need this. And 10 minutes later, that same person who's very declarative as to how things have to go in order to be successful will then themselves be even worse with potty words, even worse with behaviors. And then nobody can say anything against it. And so it's like a declaration of let's fight the system, as particular people that are asking you to join them are wanting to control you. So you either go with the government narrative or groups of people in which a particular person will say, I'm not in charge of anything, as they're actively controlling everything and cutting off anybody who doesn't do exactly what's necessary. So as they're fighting censorship, they're censoring, and then they themselves aren't censored. They'll say, we're not going to talk about that because I don't want to talk about something that could get us in trouble. And then 5 minutes later, they're talking about the very thing, but in their angle. And so that's how you know when it's a false it's falsely set up, because what they're trying to do is manage your speech in their war, in their particular way that may not benefit you at all. Exactly what the government does. So be careful of people who jump up and say, follow me, and then lecture people and make some people go away, lift some people up, as if they are the only one who can decipher truth, the only one who can push forward a particular narrative. And it's okay if they know people who everyone's questioning, and they get information from people that so if I know particular people and I'm getting information from them, but I dissuade everybody else from talking to them, why am I sharing information from people that I say are a danger? And I tell everybody else they can't talk to. And if anybody does, then they must be a turncoat, or they're not trustworthy. But I can talk to 950 people that aren't trustworthy, and I'm held to honor and a badge. That's when you know this is a joke. Like, there's a purposeful layout, and you're either over here, and you're not allowed to skew from that, or you will get bullied, whether by the government or by the groups that are forming to kind of tell you how we need to be. So that's why, like, the Malones of the world, they act like they're whistleblowing. They're telling you stuff. But if you step out of line, they will get everyone around them to hate you and say that you're a disinformation agent, while they hang out with and know and work beside disinformation agents. And that's the kind of crap that is like, okay, so I know I'm not smart, but I'm not that dumb. Like, explain this to me. And then they get frustrated. And this is why they push for censorship. This is why they have the power to try to deplatform people. This is why they make up gossip. This is why they backbite. This is why they stir up division between people, because when it gets too difficult for them to handle with their triangulation and juggling in order to keep the attention of others and demand to be the alpha in the group, they fall short. And so they need the power to shut someone down who's onto them, or who's able to get people to ask particular questions. So I would advise people have particular questions to know your audience, and to also make sure you're not targeting particular people and asking questions, cut off from information and groups of people and demonized, because then you're not effective. So you actually have to be around all kinds of groups of people and just make notes as to who is doublespeak, who is saying I can do it but nobody else can, I'm the arbiter of truth, who's able to hang out with people that they tell you not to trust. Like, these are the issues, and I'm finding that happening everywhere. And there's a lot of brilliant people that do it, and because so many people aren't aware of it, they think the numbers of followers that they get means that they are brilliant. But what ends up happening is they end up showing showing like their ass, and then they have to pull away for a while, then they come back brand new and grab a whole new group of people. You can see this all over social media, and so many people who have rebranded themselves, redone themselves. Like if you look at it, George has always been George. This is what George has always done. You can look at people that if they get kicked off, they come back, they're this exact same person. But you can tell a lot of people rebrand. They go and find different people in order to maneuver, because they're moved from one area to another in order to sow the chaos that they do. So that's what I'm finding. And we need to be more strategic and wise, because why push up against the government if the people that we're going to be joining with are even worse or just as bad? Like if someone's telling you to go and kick authority in the knee, all because they want to be authority and they believe the same thing that authority does, all you're doing is taking out one crap head for another, and that's really, we have to be careful of that. And I think we've seen this happen over history, and we really need to take note of that. So that video that Carol showed, when she's asking questions, these are important questions, right? She's not saying he's a bad guy. She's not saying he's a good guy. She's saying, well, this is noteworthy. This is something that I have questions about. This has me thinking, right? That's important. We should be doing that. And yet we don't, right? And that's a very important step in this whole journey.
Yeah, there is several groups in Ohio that are kind of Osprey leaning, right? They do more or less what we're trying to do. I don't think that they have the reach that we do internationally, but they're trying, and they're starting to fight amongst themselves because they get centered on one particular person, and they think, well, that's their immovable object, their chiodo fisso, and as long as they believe that a Robert Malone type character is the good guy, they keep going around, and they're on a Mobius strip. They're continually on this Mobius strip until someone comes along and says, look, Robert Malone may not be the guy. Oh, you can't say that about Robert Malone. He's our fixed point. You can't take that from our group. No. It's a very difficult job that we have as Ospreys in getting people off of this, he's a good guy, she's a good guy, and going to the library, getting your own data.
Well, a lot of it's not in the library. A lot of it was on the internet and is still on the internet, but not searchable anymore. So you have to kind of wiggle your way in to figure out some of these things. I mean, the information, we're finding a lot of information, but it's not easy. You can't just do a simple search anymore and get what you want. It's hidden, it's obscured.
I know, but there's a lot of data. For example, health data. Are Americans between 1970 and 2018, were Americans getting healthier or not? There is, if you go to the, there's a specific branch of every library that contains these massive texts on statistics about certain types of diseases. If you go to those texts published prior to 1975, you'll find that Americans are getting much less healthy over time. I mean, there's a perfect correlation. If you look at the rates per year of increases in disease and the number of health centers, of wellness clinics, there's a perfect correlation. The more wellness clinics, the more disease. I wonder. How are we, if we have more and more health clinics and express cares, how are we getting so unhealthy so fast? And the same with wealth. The number of wealth advisors since 1965 has gone up, like more than doubled every 3 years. And yet the more wealth advisors that we have, the less financially well off people are. I wonder if there's a correlation. I mean, I know there's a correlation, but is there causation?
they're skimming. All those financial advisors are skimming what people might be able to do if they could do it on their own, but they feel like they need an expert, and the insurance companies are skimming a whole bunch of the money that we normally would be spending on doctors and stuff. Oh, sorry, I'm getting I've got more distractions here. So I might have to leave early. We'll see how it goes.
Well, going back to what Amber was saying about the people's frustration and how they keep looking for, what do I need to do as a man or a woman in my community to get at the core of this problem that, for example, the school board, the drag queens in the elementary school. What do I need to do as a parent to get at the core issue and find out, because there's so much disinformation coming from all sides, and even other parents that you've known for 8 or 10 years might turn out to be working and biased on the one hand, everyone has their own biases,
Yeah,
but one
or
of the parents-
brainwashed, biased
Right.
or brainwashed.
or maybe there's one of the parents is part of one of these secret societies, and he or she is being pushed to in a certain direction, or outright to cause confusion. We're gonna see a lot of that over the next few months, where someone is
John, I actually know quite a few. The traffic. I actually know quite a few people that are part of groups, but they're not. So what they do is it leads to snobbery. What I mean is, like, they're part of the group. You're not. You don't understand. They're tired of trying to explain it to you. You must not be allowed in, or you must not have a grasp. And so this is why they feel so confident to be associated with the people they're associated with, because they're the ones who get to make decisions and be part of the bigger picture. And that if you understood, you wouldn't be saying what you're saying, and you're putting that into a difficult position because of your ignorance. So it's not so much that they try to mislead like a disinformation agent, or they try to maneuver. They literally just cut you out. They literally pretend you don't exist because you're beneath them. So that's what, like, particular parents and friends that are associated with it, some people just don't want to deal with you because you're saying something and it's against their sphere, their mom and pop politics, or something that on a platform of an elected official that they support because they've got stock in something, or because they have a particular job that person in elected office will benefit them, and it doesn't benefit you. They'll just shut you down and mute you because they, it will go against their bottom line. That's understandable. But then there's some people that, and they'll still have something to do with you if you tell someone happy birthday, or like if you have an exciting thing in your life, they'll say, hey, how are you? But they just won't, like, you won't be invited to particular things. But people who are part of associations will pretend like you never existed and they never knew you, in order to try to get you to fight for their friendship and prove that you're going to listen to them. So it's kind of like a game of Fox, where whoever holds out the most and ends up being right is the one who comes out, the one who has hand. Like I'm the one who knew all along. So you have to just let them do it. And then later, whoever comes back to who is the loser. And that's how they see it. Right. So if I were to approach particular people that I know that are associated with the things that I find unconstitutional because they are unconstitutional, the lesson that I need to learn is I'm not going to be heard until I come crawling back. And then if I am, I have to go through a certain amount of hoops, and I can get ignored if I'm saying something or interrupted, or someone, it's like it's supposed to be a teachable moment for me to not get out of hand again. And if I have an idea, to run it by them so they can tell me yes or no. But if I hold out and I don't approach them, because they view that as crawling back. crawling back into their good graces. But if I don't do that, then they're like, okay, does she have something going on? Like, does she have another life? Who cares anyway? Who is this person? And it's not until the thing that they've supported so much crumbles that then they're like, hey, and it has to be something that jars their memory. Where is this person? Didn't they say something about it? And then they don't view it as crawling back because they're so egotistical. They view it as, I just need to ask some questions. And so it's like a behavioral pattern. And that's why I look at it as elitist or snobby, because it's when I come back to you, it's because I have a question, because you didn't make sense and you didn't speak to me correctly or communicate it correctly. So I cut you off, and now I'll give you another chance. What is it you're trying to say? Because the thing that I thought didn't pan out. And if you go to them, you have to crawl back and you have to beg for mercy in so many like nondescript, subtle ways. So it's just an elitist, snotty, you're lucky to be in my presence kind of thing. And I happen to know a lot of people like that. And I think it's bothered them that I was like, all right. And then, I just kept doing my own thing, because they themselves will wait until they can't take it anymore, but they'll never say to themselves, I had to crawl back. But if I approach them, then they will view it as I crawled back to them. And so now they must make me pay. So it's just a snotty elitist attitude. When people say elitist, that's actually what it means. It means I can ostracize you because I'm smarter, I'm better, I'm more intellectual. But if you don't care, and then I was wrong, I'm not going to admit that. And I'm not going to look at you like you are more elitist or you are more intellectual, because I've already decided I am that thing. And the only reason why I was wrong is because it's somebody else's fault, right? And that's just the intellectual snobbery that some human beings have, where some understand we're all grains of sand and we all have an opinion. And a lot of times we can be wrong. Some people just can't see it that way because their ego is so overblown. And that's how they get their identity. I don't get my identity by making sure my opinion was right. I get my identity by who I am, what I do for others. And do I contribute and make things better, or do I contribute and make things worse? Right. That's how I get my identity. And it's on a day-to-day basis. And it's my character. There are a lot of people that don't think that way. That they've already decided that even if they fail, it's because somebody else did it, not because of their own decision making, because they're so intellectually astute that, the only reason why they didn't get it right is because somebody else did it to them. And that's the scourge. Like when I don't get something right, it's not because somebody else did it to me. It's because I didn't get it right. Right. And it's a whole behavioral issue that we have going on here. And it's usually the people with the lowest self-confidence are the ones that try to prove to everybody how amazing they are, because actually they have a very low self-confidence. And I don't, but I'm also not someone who, wants to be followed. Like I have all the answers, because that's tacky and that's a lot of pressure, and nobody should wish that on themselves ever.
Well, there was a good example of what you're talking about is a show called Car Talk. There were two brothers. I
Loved it.
Well, the two brothers with an Italian sounding last name. I won't say the last name on the broadcast, but I met one of the two brothers. He was based in Boston, and he had gone to MIT, and he was very, very knowledgeable when it came to cars and with other types of propulsion, internal combustion,
He died,
external.
He's dead, isn't he?
One of the brothers did die, yes. But the fact was, because he was very popular in the Boston area and he did know a lot about cars, he would get into these social circles talking about critical race theory or some other thing. And then, you're there, you're eating wine and cheese, and he would get a group of people around him and start talking about critical race theory. And people assumed that if you contradicted one of the brothers, that you didn't know what you're talking about, because he's on Car Talk and everybody knows he's really smart. So your opinion of critical race theory is nothing. Go away. That's how the game works.
What was his opinion? Do you know what his opinion was?
I don't remember. I just remember that everyone was saying, "Oh, Tom must be right because he's really smart."
Well, didn't they both have PhDs? I think that was why everybody thought they were really smart. They had big degrees. but they loved fixing cars.
Yeah, what I found about them that I enjoyed. Well, and here's the thing. There's a lot of people who worship. So did they say, you must follow me, I'll cut you off if you don't say that I'm right about
No,
everything?
no, it
Right.
wasn't.
So
It wasn't
it's
so
a
blunt.
hero worship. We as humans have this weird, I don't have this information, somebody else does. They gave it to me. I didn't have to do the hard work. They were really smart. People were attracted to them. Therefore, I must follow them and protect them at all means possible. And then there's the opposite, which is, who do they think they are? I must find how they're wrong about everything they say. And that's where it's like, oh my God, like we should just listen to what they have to say. If we don't believe it, then we don't believe it. But to hero worship, or if we do believe it, then we should just be happy that someone is in agreement with what our thought was. But to lift them up as if they are a godlike structure, then that puts pressure on that person, and then that person gets a bad reputation. And then it causes for people to start to be a prima donna. It starts like, but everybody else succumbs to me, and I can argue with everybody else. And some people will actually sabotage things in order to prove to people they were right to begin with. So like they'll know, okay, I'm only semi right and I made a mistake. And it's more important for them to dig for hours and hours and hours and hours to try to prove that they were right and shut down everybody else, and go in a circle that makes it take twice as long to get to the final answer in order to try to prove I am the prima donna that I think that I am, instead of just hurrying up and getting it done, finding the truth, and let's get this thing done. And it's more just like an ego protection thing that's happening, and it happens a lot, and so that's why I don't put anybody up on a pedestal. If you still have to, poop or pee, you're a human. And I don't, like, there's no pedestal there. Like, we all have our issues. We can all get sick. We can all be wrong. We can all be mean. We can all be nice. There's all these things. And like putting someone on a pedestal not only self-aggrandizes them, like you're pretty much saying you can do no wrong because I've ordained you as like someone that I need in my life. But then when they do wrong, you're promoting them to try to remain that person that people are depending on them to be. So instead of getting mad at people who have a high esteem of themselves, you've got to be partly responsible for falling over all their words as if they're amazing. And people do it everywhere. Like there's just hero worship. There's nowhere, like in sports, like literally everywhere. That's just, there's a lot of alphas out there, and then people gravitate towards it. That's a normal personality trait. But we just get captured in it. And it's life is hard. This is hard. Sociology is really important to know. Linguistics is really important to know. And your own ignorance on things is really important to know. And so, like this is the hard part. I adore a lot of people, and there's a lot of people who are really brilliant and they know exactly what they're doing. But as far as me looking at them as a hero or worshiping them, good God, no, they're a human. Like, no, I mean, I'm just setting myself up for a fall, and it's really dangerous for me to do to them. That puts undue pressure on them that they don't deserve. It's really, and they don't realize that people are putting them under pressure, and then they behave in a way that they normally wouldn't, because the pressure that's put upon them. So we're all responsible for that, not just the person who's exhibiting those behaviors.
We brought up one of my. Go ahead, Carol.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I think these are all these topics we've addressed today are real important for protecting our nest. That's what we're up against in the big picture. So
absolutely. Is that little grandson?
Yes, his mom
so
took
cute.
off to her doctor's appointment. I didn't realize I thought she was gonna take him with her, but I think she changed her mind. So yeah, he's helping me out with the broadcast this morning.
He's so cute. So cute. Like I always hear, like when I hear kids in the background, I love it. And some people, like, they get annoyed or they get upset, and I'm like, why? I mean, this is life. This is the beginning of life. It's like watching baby birds. Everybody loves to watch baby birds in a nest. Everybody loves to watch the little baby puppies and kittens. But then all of a sudden, when they see a human baby, oh my gosh, hit that thing up. Oh my God. What? And it's like, wait a minute. This is like the beginning of life. This is curiosity. This is beautiful. So I always enjoy it, and that's how moms learn to tune things out. because they want
Right.
to
Well, he
enjoy.
did give me a little concert earlier.
Oh,
He was playing the piano. It was pretty loud. Now something else is going on here. I'm going to.
but we can end the show, because that works for me because I've got kids at home and they're wanting me to do hundreds of things and I've had to push them off, like a mama bear, like go go go, because they're being loud and they want me to break up and argue. So
Right. Well, he would like some more attention than I'm giving him for sure. So I think that's a good idea. But it's been interesting.
Yeah,
So thank you both.
definitely. And we'll I'll have some videos for next week because I will have help with my angels over here, and I will talk with everyone later. And have fun this weekend, Carol, and have fun this weekend, John.
Well, thank you, Amber. And yeah, I can see you're getting sunshine. We're going to have a rainy weekend maybe. So that's okay too. We don't have to water the garden so much.
That's what I love about rain. You don't have to water the garden.
More
And
growth.
drink some tea, sit out underneath the awning and watch it.
That sounds lovely.
Well, I'm gonna leave so John can shut it down after I leave because I don't know where he went, and I'm sure you want to as well. And we will see everyone next Friday.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, sorry, everybody. If anyone is still watching, I had to take an extremely important phone call regarding someone in Osprey who's in the hospital. And it's somewhere in flyover country. And the director of that hospital, in my book, is not a very good person. Very, very not a good person. And this is the situation we find ourselves in now. I'm going to do 2 broadcasts on Monday. The first one regarding the legal system in the hospitals. And there I'll get into some fine-grained detail about one specific hospital system. And the second will be on the way that a fictitious broadcasting system, a fictitious national propaganda radio that transmits from Bougainville, Virginia. And we'll talk about how this specific program encapsulates everything that Amber and Carol and I were talking about on this episode of Protecting the Nest and the last 2 episodes that dealt with the global brain, and why they've never told us about the Global Brain Project, or how they're re-engineering the brain, or where they're getting the data, especially from 8 to 12-year-olds, necessary to re-engineer the brain. So please look for my email announcing those 2 broadcasts. Tomorrow at noon, we have George Webb, the George Webb video watch party. And please support the channel. ResearchRoadshow.com needs a lot of help, especially the website. It's not going to be cheap. I think it's going to take a minimum of $2,000 to get the website where it needs to be. You can donate in one of 3 ways. Our Venmo is venmo.com/John-Wilkins-274. Then there's buymeacoffee.com/John Wilkins, all attached. And then the PayPal, for PayPal donations. By the way, thanks to the last 4 people who donated through PayPal without me even asking. You can use my phone number, 440-506-5815, to look up my PayPal account. And please pray for the elderly who are being held essentially hostage to big data. Please pray for the children involved in some of the experiments that we talked about. And pray for those who are just looking for an end to this insanity. Thanks, everybody. See you next Friday on Protecting the Nest.